Let's take a look at which plants lived and which plants died in my tropical yard near Seattle, Washington, Zone 8A. First, we'll talk about the bird of paradise. I have 2 of these plants. I originally bought one from Home Depot, but it had 2 plants in the pot. I divided it last year. Both of them are doing well. One of them's a little bit further along than the other. This smaller one looks a little bit rough, but you can see the last leaf looks great. There's a new leaf coming out, and this is going to look pretty by the end of this summer. They both survived. They were in the house for most of the winter. Once it got to about 35 degrees Fahrenheit, just above freezing, 12°C, I brought them inside. They stayed inside all winter. Next, we'll look at the blue javas. Now, I tried to overwinter blue javas last year outside, failed miserably. I think it was just too wet here in this area, and the corms rotted out and nothing grew back. So this year we brought them inside, had them in pots. They did push out a new leaf each. I had 4 of them in total, and those are looking really good. I've put 2 of them in the front of the house in the ground now. You can see the edge of the leaves are a little bit dried out. I got kind of lazy in watering towards the end of winter and early spring. I was just tired of spending 30 minutes every few days watering all the plants and got a little bit lazy with it. So that's what they look like when they aren't getting enough water. They start to dry out on the edges of the leaves. But overall, it's good. It's in the ground now, so it'll get lots of rain in the rest of the spring, and it'll be on the automated drip once summer starts. Next, we'll look at the Sabal Palmetto, also known as a cabbage palm. This spent most of the winter indoors. I did leave it out for a good while. It saw below freezing temperatures, around 25 Fahrenheit, which is like -4°C or so, before I brought it in. Once I brought it in, I just left it inside. So it did stay inside for the coldest parts of the winter and is doing okay. It's got a little bit of damage, as you can see, but it's alive, so that's good. Next, we'll take a look at my Canna lilies. I've got some in the front and some in the back. Cleopatra's in the front. These things are doing great. They get coverage from the overhead roof here, and so I do leave them in the ground all winter. I did not pull these out. That's too much work for me. I don't need more stuff to dig up and plant every year. So I leave them in the ground. They're coming up beautifully here in the front, and in the back, they're doing well. Also, I planted a couple of new Canna lilies here, the golden green variety to go with the Australia variety, and they're all coming back. So looking good for Canna lilies. Next, we'll take a look at the Chamerops. I've got 2 of them. This is the European or Mediterranean fan palm. I've got one in the front, one in the back. We'll take a look at the one in the back first. This one's in a pot. I've had it for 4 years now, and it's continuing to do really well in the pot. I do bring this in when it gets really cold, so it does see freezing temperatures. This is another one. I'll leave it out to about 25 degrees Fahrenheit, -4°C. Once it hits below that temperature, I'm bringing it inside. And so it spent the coldest days of the winter in the house, but saw 25 Fahrenheit with no issues. You can see this is almost flawless. There's a little bit of damage from a previous year, but other than that, this is a really good looking palm. The one in the front, not so lucky. It is in the ground. I planted this one first year last year in the ground. So it saw temperatures of about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's around -10°C. And yeah, it's hurting. 4 of the trunks lost their spears, but it's still green, and you can see there is some rough new growth out of some of these trunks. So it is still alive, just not looking that great, and some of these trunks might not grow anymore. I didn't do much to try and winterize it. It did get a strand of C9 Christmas lights the week it was 15 Fahrenheit. That's all I did. No box, no insulation, nothing like that. Next, we'll look at the Musa double Mahoi. This banana I've had, this will be my 3rd year of having this plant. It did fine all winter inside. You can see the second stem here is catching up to the first stem, the original plant. and we've got a third pup shooting off here. So it's doing well, doing healthy, looks good. We've got it coming out, starting to get used to sunlight. So it sits along the fence here and just moves out into the open a little bit more each day until it's ready to be in full sun. On the inside, we've got the Dwarf Cavendish. This plant I've always left inside, even for the summer. I'm thinking about pulling it outside this year. This will be the 4th year that I've had it. It just recently shot out a pup for the first time. And it's not all that big. Yes, it's a dwarf, but it's still 4 years old. Next up on the list, we've got elephant ears. These are just starting to poke out of the ground in the back. These elephant ears get protected from the rain. This is another root plant that I don't dig up any kind of roots or bulbs. It stays in the ground all winter in my yard. It gets the protection from the cedar tree, so it doesn't get much rain at all in the winter. And I've successfully overwintered these in the ground for a few years now. So they're just starting to come out and should be looking good in the coming weeks. Next, we've got Ensete Ventricosums. I have 2 of them. Both of these spent all winter inside in a pot. Originally, I had got them last year, stuck them in the ground, and dug them up for the winter. They did fine inside. I had problems keeping the leaves not broken. they were growing pretty weak and breaking quite often with just minimal movement. So they look, well, the one in the front looks better than the one in the back. The one in the front actually looks pretty good. The one in the back, it was growing kind of funky too because it was leaning and I didn't take the time to fix it. So it looks kind of funky right now, but that should grow out of it and it will look good in the coming months. Next, we have these sad little fig sticks. These I got from my buddy James. Don't know how they're going to do this year. You can see the bigger one actually does have a few little nubbins growing out of it of green. So it is alive and looks like it will grow some leaves this year. The 2 smaller ones, nothing visible yet. So I don't know if the freeze killed those or if they're just coming along slower than the larger one. So we'll see what this looks like in the summer. Next on the list, we've got the hot lava. I thought this plant was dead. I moved it into the ground at the start of last summer and it dropped all its leaves when I transplanted it. Never grew any new leaves last year. And so it was just sticks going into winter. And I left it because why not? It looks like a lot of the stuff here in the winter, just some dead sticks coming out of the ground. But surprisingly, it's pushed out a bunch of leaves and looks like it will come through. It's not very pretty right now, but this is another one. It should continue to push out new growth through the early summer and will look pretty good once it's full again. This hot lava was in the ground all winter, so it saw negative 10°C, 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and is growing just fine. Taking a look at the koi bamboo in the back, this grew quite a bit last year. Over the winter, no real issues with the stuff in these raised beds. The bamboo that I have in pots along the fence does not look very good. It just looks really dry for some reason. I want to do something different. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but it did survive. And all this bamboo, doesn't come in. So it saw 15 Fahrenheit, negative 10°C, and is doing okay. Next, we'll look at the lobster claw. I really neglect this thing. I don't do a good job. This is one of my failures as a plant padre. I need to do better with this plant. It got put next to, too close to, I should say, a fireplace in the house over winter and got fairly dried out because of the fireplace going. I don't water it enough, so it doesn't look great at all. I mean, it still is pushing out new growth, as you can see here. I need to take better care of it if I want it to look good. Otherwise, it's going to continue to look like this, and I'd rather have it not look like this. And my little duct tape splint is not holding up because I broke the long stem when I moved it out here. Poor plant. Sorry. Next on the list, the Loquat. So this was a new tree that I planted last year, just looking for something that was evergreen. The Loquat fit the bill. It survived in the ground, 15 Fahrenheit. It did lose some of the newer growth in that cold week. but you can see it's growing back again now. All this light green is new growth, and it is looking pretty good. It's got a couple of leaves that will wait for them to fall off, but more than enough to keep it going, and that it's growing is a great sign. Next, we have 2 Manzano bananas. This will be the second summer that I've had these. I got these at the beginning of last summer. I had Manzanos previously that did not survive the winter in the house. Both of these have survived the winter and are hopefully going to put on some big growth this year. I'll move them into some bigger pots and give them a little bit more space. We've got a little pup on one, which is always a good sign that things are going well. Next, let's talk about the Musa Basjoo. So I have these in a few spots. The big patch, I mean, they're coming back, although there's something going on, not just with mine, but all my neighbors that have them and folks that I know online. I've seen a lot of people talking about they're just not coming back this year like they have in other years, and mine are no exception to that. The larger stems that did not fruit from last year are not coming back. Lots of new pups, and some of the smaller stems from last year are growing back. Those are the big ones that you see, but none of the big ones are growing back, which means they'll be a little bit shorter this year, but that's fine. We should still get some to a pretty good size, 15 feet plus. With the ones that we have now, they're about 3 feet tall, and it still is just the middle of May, so lots of time for them to grow. These I put no protection on at all, any of them this winter. Usually I wrap a couple. I decided to see what does it look like when I don't do anything. So these just sat. Some of them I just left up. I didn't even cut them down until they collapsed after freezing down to the ground. And I won't do that again. I'll wrap at least 1 or 2 each year after seeing how this year has gone. So, but no, I mean, they saw 15 Fahrenheit with no protection, and they're okay. Next, we'll take a look at the Mule Palms. I have 2 of these. These are the 2 that spear pulled last winter, and they're looking pretty good this year. I did leave them outside most of the winter. So we had that 1 week with 15 Fahrenheit as a low, but other than that, these things sat outside. So they sat in 25 Fahrenheit overnight lows, lots of rain. I kept them away from the cedar tree this year, and they are healthy, lots of new, good growth, nice green color, and these are doing really well. Next, we'll talk about Musa Namwah. So I got these at the end of last summer. So they were still pretty small when I brought them in the house. 3 of them have died completely. I don't know what it is with my house and baby banana plants, but they just don't seem to do well. Now the 4th one is still holding on. I'd give it a 50-50 shot. It is outside now, and I don't seem to have any problems with babies outside. It just, when I bring them inside, they have problems. But you can see here, kind of, this is what happened to all the other ones. The stem turns black, and eventually it goes all the way through and they collapse. With it being outside now, hopefully this one survives, but the other 3 are toast. Needle palm, as expected, looks great. This was a new palm for me last year when I started finally working on my front yard. I put this 1 needle palm here in the mix with a bunch of windmill palms. Looks good, no damage, as expected. Next, let's talk about the Puerto Rican hat palm. This is not doing well. It is still alive, but lost most of its foliage. It was outside until about that 25 Fahrenheit. It had seen temps that low before, but for some reason it got real unhappy this year, and I wasn't sure it was going to live. There was almost no green left at all. It does look like it will survive, but just barely. Now, funny enough, I have a bunch of baby, like really baby Puerto Rican hat palms that I started from seed last year. Those saw the same temperatures. They're all fine. They're all in these little tiny pots that have next to no soil. They saw all the same weather. Nothing wrong with any of them. Continuing on the Puerto Rico train, we've got a Puerto Rican plantain here. This came inside with all the sensitive stuff before it got below freezing. Did well indoors, started shooting out a new pup here, grew a little bit over the winter as well. So it's doing well and should grow quite a bit this summer. It's over here with the others getting used to sun again, and we'll be out in the open soon. Next, we've got the Pygmy date palm. It's looking good. Older fronds are starting to fade as expected. New growth out of the 3 trunks that there are in this pot, and did well. This goes inside, so I bring it out. It's out for about 6 months out of the year, and inside for the rest. So I haven't had any problems with it moving in and out like that. And this is going to be, I think, year 4 or 5 that I've had that palm. Next on the list, the Yucca Rostrada. This is in the front yard, one of the new additions from last year. It did well. I was a little bit concerned because it's a desert plant and I live in Western Washington, which is far from a desert, but you know, everything I read said, oh, it'll do okay. And it did, even getting soaked all winter. So it's in good shape, and I'm excited for this thing to keep growing. Next, looking at Sabal Minors. I have 2 of these. I got these at the same time, although they're much different sizes now. One of them's been in a pot, the other's been in the ground, and I just wanted to see the difference. Does it really matter for these? And as you can see, it has. The one in the pot's much larger. It's taken a little bit of damage because I do let it see cold, just not all the way cold. At that 25 Fahrenheit level, I bring that back in, and the one in the ground just stays in the ground. So it's taken more damage over the winters and is still alive, but not very impressive. Next, I put one Musa Sikkimensis in the front yard, and it looks like it's dead. There's nothing here, nothing growing back. At this point now, it should be pushing up something. It's pushing up nothing. I'm going to give it a little bit more time, but at this point, I'm counting this as dead, and I will probably just put Musa Basjoos up here in this spot going forward. I have this one plant. I don't even know what it is. It came in some flower basket thing that my wife got, but it's been a big part of the backyard because it got so big and spiky. It actually died in this winter. Can't say why. It survived last winter, which had the same low temperatures, similar amounts of rain. It just collapsed after we had the really cold week, and I cut it down to where it was fully solid. And as you see, there's nothing happening here. Next, we've got Super Dwarf Cavendish bananas. This will be the first year that I bring these outside for summer. They've done well for me inside. This is the first time I'm bringing them out. Just want to get them a little bit more sun and see if we can get these things to fruit as well. They've got pups and all looking pretty healthy. I've got 3 of them outside. I did leave one inside still, and I'll probably leave that one inside just to see how different they grow inside versus outside. But yeah, 3 in pots that are coming out. Next, we'll talk about the Washingtonia Palms. These I picked up from Lowe's last year. They were, well, one I got from Lowe's, the other I got from McClendon's. Wasn't even labeled as a palm tree, but I saw it and was like, oh, free palm tree. So they both did okay. Now, I did keep them under this awning partially, so they didn't see the full wet of a Seattle winter, but they did see most of the cold. This is another one. As long as it was above 25 Fahrenheit, I left them outside, so they got lots of cold, some of the rain, and they both look really good. And so we will put these in nicer pots and keep them out for the summer. Windmill Palms, I got these all over the place. No real issues with them this year. I put a bunch in the front yard. This is the first year those are there in the ground. All of those were in pots last year, just in the backyard, and came in during the coldest weather. But this year they spent it in the ground. They all did fine. There's maybe a little bit of damage. There's a fair amount of damage on the larger one from when I transplanted it. It was pretty root bound, and I did some significant root damage getting it out of its concrete pot. So a lot of the damage that you see showed up right after I transplanted it last year. But all the new growth is nice green color and these should start to take off. The one in the backyard was this size 3 years ago. I planted that in 2021. The fronds were below the fence line, and now it's got 8 feet of trunk and is 12 to 13 feet, something like that tall, with the top of the fronds. And coming in with a surprise bird 2 years in the row here, the Flamboyan is still, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's thriving, but it's alive and it's doing well. It's got new growth coming out of it. It didn't get a lot taller last year. It seems to be in this cycle where it pushes out new leaves, they stay around for a little bit, and then that little branch dies, and then it pushes out more leaves, and it's constantly pushing out new branches. And so I'll keep this alive as long as I can. I did not put this outside at all last year. It stayed in even in the summer. I just didn't want to put it out because of the lows at night or make it unhappy. So once this thing sees 55 degrees Fahrenheit, it starts to drop leaves. So that's what, like 12 to 15 C, something like that. And last but not least, the saddest story of the winter, the Pindo Palms. Now I'll talk about the good one first. The one in the front yard that I put in the ground looks fine. I mean, it took some damage from the cold. The only thing I did with C9 Christmas lights wrapped around it. Can't move it. Wasn't going to dig it up. So it sat in the ground, took the cold like a champ with just the lights, and is pushing out new growth. Nice green, healthy looking palm. The two in the back are not so lucky. The smaller one, this thing is dead. There's a tiny hint of green left, but there's like, this is dead for sure. 100%. Okay. 99%, but still it's like, I have no hopes that this is going to come back at all. Might try cutting it up just to see how it looks on the inside, but yeah, no hope of this one coming back. The larger one, this was the second palm tree that I bought at this house. It was about 8 inches tall when I got it. It's had its spear pole, and some of those center fronds, a couple of them are not okay. They're really dried out. This is exactly what the Mule Palms looked like last year when they spear pulled. So I've treated both with H2O2 and copper fungicide. This one is pushed under the patio, so it gets no rain at all. And we'll see what happens. I'm 50-50 on this one coming back. It'll be sad if it goes, but I mean, that's part of the game, right? We do this because we love it, and sometimes we take an L. I don't know, maybe I'll put the washies in these bigger pots and see how that goes. Check out what lived and died the previous year by watching this next video.